Okay, next up we have Kristopher He's the VP and Environmental Regional Marketing Leader for T&M Associates. Our keynote speaker is a seasoned environmental consultant with more than 30 years of experience supporting communities and organizations as they navigate complex regulatory frameworks, particularly in coastal regions. Today he will provide an overview of the latest NJDEP NJREAL rulings and their anticipated implementations for our community's planning and development. Sir. Thank you.
The moment you all been waiting for sure. So DEP adopted the rule. There's a lot of opposition against the rule. There's a lot of people that want to push back on the rule. It's going to greatly impact the great state of New Jersey and the development that takes place with it. So we will see. As the commissioner mentioned, there will be lawsuits filed against it trying to stop this from rolling forward and kind of undoing it, but that's to be determined and see where it goes. I promise I'll have everybody out of here by 12:30. Just kidding. The rule, the way it's written, this is really, really technical, right? So reading the tea leaves and understanding who's in the room, the presentation is going to be made available. This is the rule, the way that it was written, requires the modification of the Freshwater Wetlands Protection Act, CAFRA, waterfront development, stream or flood hazard, stormwater, all the above, right? So it's not just one rule that kind of captures all of this. This rule was adopted 9 days ago. I've had to spend the last week reading 5 sets of rules to try and understand, like, okay, what are the key highlights? And the key takeaways here, really, it's going to increase the elevation of sea level, right? It's going to be 4 foot above the FEMA flood elevation based on, the Rutgers study and the 2100 rainfall curve data, right? Then you put 1 foot of freeboard on top of that so that your houses are going to have to be above 5 feet, in all theory, above the FEMA flood elevation. It's a big deal. It's a cost. It's going to take time to get your approvals. There's many things that affect development, and this is now going to greatly change how it happens in the state of New Jersey. Permit modifications, you're going to have stricter requirements if you want to transfer a permit from one person to another. If you buy a house, you sell a house, whatever it is, you have a business, you want to sell the business, permits, there's going to be those requirements. Inundation risk assessments, you're now going to be required to perform an assessment to see if your project's in a low-lying area to ensure that it's not going to be subject to flooding, right? So, I mean, these are all new things that are going to take time and money. Updated technical manuals, all the new rules are out. Wetland mitigation requirements in transition areas, wetlands, riparian zones. I mean, it's all going to decrease your buildable footprints, right? And then legacy, you'll have until July 20th for the new rules to kick in. But my advice to you is if you have permit applications, get them in next week because it takes forever to get deemed complete. It's a big process, right? So, a couple of the key changes, Freshwater Wetlands Protection Act, there's stormwater and mitigation alignment. They're kind of combining the two because obviously if you have a higher flood elevation, your stormwater is going to be impacted. So the rules are kind of taking a different look at all of that. So for major developments, if a project impacts a wetland or a transition area, it qualifies as a major development. Mitigation now includes compliance with the updated rules. The big thing here is this volumetric reduction and enhanced water quality. Volumetric reduction means that you can't really let any water from your property leave the site. It's got to be detained and then it releases over time. That's an impact that's going to be kind of hard to get around, and it's part of the process of getting your approvals. You're going to have on-site restoration. You can't put any basins within 25 feet of a wetland. It used to be 20 feet, right? So just trying to keep it at a higher level. Transition area mitigation, you're going to be doing averaging plans. Everything has to get a conservation restriction on it now. So if you modify a small portion of a transition area, the entirety of the transition area on the property gets deed restricted and has a conservation easement on it. Riparian zone, you're going to have to mitigate for that. So as your surface water elevation rises, it gets to a bigger surface, right? So your riparian zones will be impacted by the increase in that elevation. And then you'll be required to mitigate for any riparian zone impact over 2,000 square feet, right? You're going to have to buy restoration credits. There's all these different requirements that are now going to come out of this. If you disturb vernal habitat, you're going to have to do vernal habitat mitigation on site to make sure that you have the amount of water that stands on the property to allow that habitat to occur. And then obviously you'll have mitigation banking, which that's a commodity in the state of New Jersey. Mitigation banks, you know, it's very, very expensive. You have to buy an acre of wetlands, it could cost you probably $700 to $1 million. That's where the prices are going. So flood hazard elevation, the flood hazard rules get changed as well. The new rule, you have to look at two different areas, right? You have a tidal flood hazard area, a climate adjusted flood elevation, which is the 4 feet above the FEMA 100-year base flood. And then you have fluvial. So there's a situation where you're going to have a tidal water body that ultimately reaches a fluvial water body, and as that water elevation rises, there's going to be an area of a combination of the two, if you will. So you're going to have to do studies to find out which way you're going to be regulated, right? So the DEP has clarified how it handles sites where both tidal and fluvial flooding occur. Meadowlands River, Raritan River, Atlantic coastal tributaries, it's more north. And then the governing elevation, you'll have to calculate both the tidal coastal adjusted flood elevation, which is 4 feet, and then the fluvial flood elevation, and the higher of the two elevations will govern your design. Very, very technical. What it really means is it's going to affect the way that development takes place in the state. And it's probably going to represent that there's going to be a decrease in development. And there's other ramifications which I'll get into. I'm not going to get into the methods. This is the biggest change that ever happened to the Coastal Area Facility Review Act, CAFRA, right? The 4-foot rule, it requires an inland expansion because the 4-foot standard is used to map the department's jurisdiction. It used to be like there was like a meets and bounds of roadways that told you where the CAFRA boundary was. Now it's going to be based on elevation. So if you weren't in the CAFRA zone, well, you may be now. And if you weren't in a flood hazard zone, you may be as well. So you get into the creation of these inundation risk zones, which is ultimately where land is projected to be impacted by sunny day flooding or by the year 2100 base flood of a 4-foot sea level rise. So what this all means is that when you go to submit CAFRA permits, you're going to have to do an inundation risk assessment, you're going to have to do an alternatives analysis, and you're going to have a formal risk acknowledgement with a deed notice on your properties. What it does is it takes the soft costs of engineering and it's going to raise them because there's going to be more study required, and it's going to be an impact to businesses, homeowners, you name it. Stormwater management for coastal development. Major development triggers stormwater has been tight for coastal projects. You know, now you're looking at areas where it used to be like if it was a redevelopment that it was exempt from certain stormwater activities. Now it's not. It's automatically included, and you have to contain 80% of your total suspended solids, which makes your water quality cleaner. Dry access requirements for multifamily residential and critical infrastructure. You're going to have to do dry access, which means you got to provide one way in that's dry. How do you do it? You raise roads. Impacts the county. We've had that discussion, Commissioner. It's going to cause you to have capital projects in your municipalities to make roads dry, to have access. Now, granted, that's for new projects. It's not like you're going to have to go around and raise all of your roads, but there will be impacts fiscally and financially to the governing bodies and to the county. Stormwater management for coastal redevelopment. You know, there used to be a general permit process. Now it's going to be, you know, a little bit more streamlined for coastal protection. Getting a permit for a new bulkhead, high energy zones require more rigorous demonstrations. There's just the stormwater management rule, which we'll touch on in a minute, is it's going to look more for like living shorelines. It wants to get away from hard armoring like bulkheads, and we've done a lot of living shorelines in Little Egg Harbor, and you know they're successful, but they take time and money. Stormwater rule. The real big takeaway here is that a major development, you know, if you're more than a quarter of an acre of regulated motor vehicle surface, now you're going to be a major project. 1 acre or more of regular land disturbance, you're a major project. And what that means is that it's a heightened water quality standard. You've got to address more water quality in order for your development to occur. So what does that mean? You're going to need more basins. Your basins are going to be bigger. You're going to have less area to develop. It's going to decrease your footprint for development. The takeaway for me from this whole rule is that it's going to decrease development in the great state of New Jersey. And if we have another major catastrophic event, like Sandy, if you put your house, 3 feet or 4 feet up on piles, well, if your house gets destroyed again, you're gonna have to tear the piles out, put in new ones, and get to that 5 foot above the FEMA floodplain elevation. You're gonna see less houses, and then you're gonna see a tax base that does not decrease. So what you're gonna have is less people, and the taxes are going to increase. And in order for towns and counties to do their improvements, their capital budget will probably likely increase, which will be shared with the residents. So this is why people are up in arms. This is why Atlantic County wants to file this lawsuit, is because the ramifications are significant. Granted, the conservation groups will sit back and will say, this is great, it's gonna save lives and it's gonna save money. And FEMA says, well, if you keep building in the floodplain, in the flood zone, we're not gonna fund you, or we're not gonna, pay you back. On the development side and on the business side, to bring it all to this whole group, the reality of the situation is that it's going to impact the cost of everything that happens, and it's gonna take as a business to raise your price, or it's gonna take more money out of your pocket. Nonetheless, this all gets into future predictive rainfall data, green infrastructure, which is where you wanna have, stormwater that has best management practices, rain gardens, porous pavement. I did a development in Toms River for the VA, and we had to do the entire parking lot in porous pavement. Because of the new stormwater rules, that's a significant cost. You can't salt it. Now granted, snow's not supposed to stick to it, but when you have a snowstorm like we just did this past Sunday, you're gonna get snow on a VA parking lot. You're talking about people that are in wheelchairs, things of that nature. So some of these requirements really have some technical impacts, if you will, to what a development's gonna look like. And then, here again, transition and legacy project, you'll have to July 20th, 2026. That's an important date. If this rule sticks, the rules become effective on that date. But if you have projects that are in the works now, like I said, get them done. Get them submitted, get them deemed complete, because sometimes getting deemed complete could take 3-4 months. So who's gonna be affected? Property owners, business owners near tidal waterways and fluvial streams. Property owners, business owners previously located within flood hazard elevation, possibly requiring property business owners to obtain new or additional flood insurance. Potential homeowners that elevated their homes, like in Sandy, they'll have to go up higher again. And then municipalities and county governments will be required to make certain public capital improvements. That's just the way that it's going to roll out. So I realize that's really fast. The actual summary of the rules was 1,583 pages, right? I didn't want to sit here. I'm kind of like, how technical do I really want to get, and how many people do I want to watch sleeping? The summary will saved on South Jersey Chamber's website. I'll leave business cards if you have questions. We're here to assist. But the reality is that this rule is going to greatly impact the great state of New Jersey, and it's going to limit development, and it's going to have a capital cost that goes with it. So, any quick, easy questions?
I have a question. Okay.
Sure.
My question is, so if they're going up the elevation, the 5 feet, there's a height restriction. So how is that, because they only have a height restriction, but you're going up?
The local governing bodies are going to have to adjust what their ordinances say. I mean, if you've got to go up, I understand that. I went through my own personal situation with a height requirement. The ordinance will have to be modified. I mean, the state rule is, if this is going to stick, that's going to be the governing basis of what you're going to have to do in order to get all your entitlements, CAFRA, flood hazard, whatever it's going to take.
So I have a quick question. So the houses that didn't have substantial damage during Sandy, that didn't have to be lifted, does anything have to be done with those houses?
No.
So anything that's already there?
Anything that's already there,
That's
that's right. Now, there's a gray area whether your homeowner's insurance is going to, if you were outside of a flood hazard area and now you're going to be in it, there's a gray area in my mind that what's on the street and what we're talking about. Meanwhile, everybody at DEP that I talk to is not 100% sure how these rules get implemented yet, right? So, but there is that gray area. Well, do you need flood insurance, and is your homeowner's insurance going to require that now? I don't know if the insurance companies are going to go that way. Everybody's an independent utility. It depends. If we have another catastrophic event and you flood, then you'll have to address and adjust and go
I'm
from
actually
there.
an insurance agent, so
There you go.
And the car accident.
Thank God I didn't say anything wrong.
Yeah.
So the two questions that we've gotten most, I mean, we've been talking about this for 8 years, right, about
Yep.
coming. So one is change of use. So if you're a business and say, you know, you have property that's now in a flood zone, most of, or, you know, Southern Ocean County could be, are they allowed to say to a developer, well, we'll sell you the business now, you can change it from being a retail building to private homes without having to go through the state?
I just literally did a case analysis on this for a client. So if you have a commercial retail space and you're in a flood hazard area, and you want to make it an occupiable structure, or structures more than 3 makes it an occupiable structure, you're going to have to get your permits. So then you're going to get into a situation where is it substantial improvement, and if the cost of the substantial improvements is like more than half of the project area, FEMA will make sure that you improve all of the structures that are going to be associated with it to bring it up to code. So the answer to your question is yes. If there is a change of use is a big thing, especially if you're going to habitable structures.
So the other, I guess, clarity is they don't apply to the town anymore. First, they have to go through
Well, no, you're still
the state.
you're gonna have to do, it's the same process as now. You have to get all of your entitlements. So as a consultant, what we always say is get your CAFRA permit first, because if you have to go to a town, and you're gonna have to change your site plan, or you can do them at the same time. But if you have to modify something, then you have to keep going back to the town and going through hearing after hearing and hearing. We always say get your state entitlements first and then move to the county and to the town.
And the other question is, if you have a home, like Claudia said, a home that was never affected, but say you want to expand it, you know, knock it down, turn it into a modern home, is that now going to have to go through the state on this implication?
Depends on the square footage of how much you're going to increase the size of the home, right? If you're going to, I believe the number's 700 square feet. If you get bigger than 700 square foot of an addition, then you have to get a CAFRA permit for a single-family home or duplex. It depends on what you do. But, I mean, there is a possibility that you will have to go to the state if you don't comply with the thresholds.
Those were the most questions that we've been getting,
Yeah.
so.
There's a lot. I spoke to a former state employee last night, and he said to me, he said, the state doesn't even have a presentation put together on the summary of what's going on yet, right? So it's so new. I spent probably 80 hours trying to get my head wrapped around it. Because there was so much proposed, right? There was so much proposed in the rule. And then when the new rule came out, half the stuff that was proposed wasn't taken out, but you have to go through the regulation with a fine-tooth comb in order to find out, do I need a traffic study every time I do a CAFRA permit? If I have a temporary impact on a freshwater wetland, do I have to mitigate for it? These are all the things that you probably won't know until about a year or two from now once you start applying this to your developments. But I will tell you that the impacts are going to be significant based on what the proposal shows.
Because this isn't just about waterfront homes anymore.
This is throughout the state of New Jersey.
Yeah.
Hoboken, Jersey City, development's done.
Yeah.
You can't, you're in a flood hazard area, the cost to elevate, it's going to be,
So it changes our customer base, because the people that are going to be
Oh,
coming
certainly.
in now are
Yeah.
going to be people that can afford all of these extra
That's right.
plus
As the Assemblyman said, the impacts here, I mean, this is, the governor signed this bill 4 hours before he walked out of office and turned out the lights.
Yeah.
This impacts people, this impacts dollars, right? It impacts business, it impacts homeowners, government, you know?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the CAFRA zone is kind of changing
Yeah,
because it now it's not meets the bounds anymore now
could be based on elevation.
based in elevations. So here in town, it was basically, whether it's accurate or not, it was east of the parkways, you follow the CAFRA, west of the parkway, you follow the Highlands.
Highlands, yes.
So if there's which I don't know how much would apply here, but certainly could you possibly be subject to both CAFRA and Highlands?
Yeah, yeah. When I did the parkway widening, I had to do both, right? So not that that applies to regular homes and developments, but if you start having CAFRA going west of the parkway, you're gonna have to do both agencies. I don't know what that looks like yet.
Yeah, it's really the jurisdictional creep is really what it is.
Is really what it is. I mean, the scary thing to me is that if you have a stream that you know it's just a fluvial stream, it's not tidal, and now you're gonna raise your flood hazard elevation 4 feet, that water's gonna creep all the way back up into a fluvial situation. So the gray area is, how am I regulated? Am I fluvial, am I tidal? Do I need flood hazard insurance? I mean, there's all of these factors that nobody, except for the people who wrote it, the Vince Mazzais of the world, who understand, like, this is what we're doing, we're gonna protect the environment. You know, resilient environments and landscapes. Okay, I get it. The great state has seen catastrophic flooding, and I'm compassionate to all of it. To use rainfall data from the year 2100, it's just crazy. It's so far out. 74 years later. I mean, it's just, what are we doing? And the Rutgers study, not to get into the technicalities, but the Rutgers study, a lot of people feel that it was flawed, that it wasn't comprehensive enough. So, I mean, I don't want to be disparaging what the government has done. It's here, right? So now, for the engineering folks of the world, it's, what do we do? How do we navigate the course? And when you tell your client that it's going to be 25% more, they're going to look at you like, well, what are you talking about? They're going to be like, listen, I got to implement the rules. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Thoughts, questions? Leave cards behind if anybody needs anything. We're here to help. Thank you.